All right, ladies and gentlemen, we now come to an exciting session where the big boys of technology will come together to discuss how, in the collision of the content world, technology has become the savior. So please welcome on stage the Chief Technology Officer of HOOQ, Mr. Michael Flashman, the Chief Technology Officer of the Fox Plus, Mr. Michael Whittaker, and this panel's moderator, Mr. Michael Smith Jr., partner at Seed Plus. Please give a big round of applause.
All right. Are we ready, guys?
Yeah.
So this is going to be interesting because we're all either Mike, Michael, or Mike, so I got to be cognizant of who I'm talking to. And there is kind of connectivity here, in case people don't know. I actually used to be the CTO of Hook before Michael came and kicked me out. So that's, and the fact that we have the same name even makes it even more interesting. So just so everybody knows the background on why I'm the moderator for
Why I'm
this.
sat in the middle.
Just to keep us from fighting. Yeah, exactly. So my name's Michael. I've been in the region for a long time. I'm Singapore's most famous panel moderator, and yeah, I wasn't kidding. But so this is going to be fun. So this is kind of an open session in that we've talked a little bit about some questions. But before we do that, let's kick off because both of you are fairly new to the region, and I think that's interesting and kind of gives you a sense of how big and important Asia is becoming. So let's start with Michael from Hook on how you arrived at the region and where you came from.
Yeah, I think that, well, there are a few angles there. Number one is just the platform that Hook is making. I've actually been thinking about creating this sort of a platform and working with other companies in terms of trying to create that. So the opportunity that came to me when you left Hook is
I did that for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that's number one. There's a personal affinity to the region as well. My kids are adopted from China. My wife has spent a lot of time working here, so I wanted to be in Asia and do some work here. And then in terms of there's a bit of unfinished business here in terms of the business plans that I've looked at, because I think there's quite a lot of potential for this region, right? And I think Hook's in a good position to capitalize on that.
Mike, how did you get here?
A really long plane journey from the UK.
Okay.
Actually via Canada, so over the date line. So my first time in the region really messed with my head, having gone across the date line. But I moved to the region in September. And I think for me the attraction was, it's a part of the world I don't know. I've lived in the Middle East, I've worked a lot in Africa and Central Asia previously. But I think the attraction for me was A, new region, B, it's Fox, which is a great global brand when you think of all our brands, because we're not just Fox, we've got Nat Geo as well, and some fabulous properties. But it was also being part of Fox Asia's journey from being really successful in linear on into digital, and how we then look to change not just how audiences consume our content, but how we, people are using the phrase a lot, how we tell our stories, looking at our production as well.
Got it. So part of my premise that, and the questions will be around this, and hopefully we'll have audience question times, but we won't take any questions about the blockchain, just FYI. My view on kind of the corporate world is if you look at large conglomerates where the CIOs become hugely instrumental, and in some senses almost become the CEO of companies if you look at the tech infiltration in companies. So my same view is in OTT companies, the CTO is hugely instrumental in the company because one, OTT is largely still a technical problem, and at the same time, there's also so much going on in the company that also relates to technology, whether it be from content, from customer acquisition, to the data and things like that. So CTOs are really instrumental in OTT. So if we kind of take that as the top, and where we go with this, a couple of questions I have is, the OTT is not in its infancy anymore, right? We can say it's been around for a while. We talked about iPlayer and stuff like that. It's been going on for a while, but yet there's still always this build or buy type of thing, and what's happening with the technology onslaught when it comes to platforms. So what's your guys' own personal view on how you look at platforms and where do you think platforms are headed?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the first comment you made, which is about CTO, CIO, and what's going on. And I think it's not so much about whether it's a CTO or a CIO, but what it stands for, right? And if you think of CIOs, it's very much about optimizing a current process, right? It's Six Sigma. It's how you actually make something more efficient. Where I think most people associate a CTO or look at the CTO to be the most the person who's helping to create that roadmap if they're looking for product and development to be the key. And what we see here is, even though I think OTT to a certain extent, there are a lot of things where we'd say if you look across a number of services, there are a lot of similarities, there's still quite a bit that has to be done in order to get the right business models, and especially in this particular region, that require a product mindset, an engineering mindset, build, deploy, learn mindset that is very much around what CTOs are known for doing. So I think it says something about what companies know is important right now around that innovation and around that experimentation. I think that's more it. You still have the CIO role, but now that's something that's seen as something that's subsidiary to that.
Agreed.
I think as well the difference, if you, I've spent my career in the media, is you go from the chief engineer concept where we would integrate and we would build and we'd do an R&D, but it would be at the head end. So we'd do it once at the TV station or whatever, and then the program would go out over RF or satellite. But now, absolutely, it's the product mindset, because you're not just putting your content into people's pockets. You know, you're putting code, and that code's got to be thoroughly tested. And I think as well, it was interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday with a colleague in the industry just about, again, and it's not so much the CTO, but if you look at how it impacts the whole business. When you come from a linear environment, you have your channel managers who run, you know, your movie channel, your sports channels. But actually, should we start thinking of them as product managers as well, so that you know, integrates better with that whole product mindset? So it's not, you're not just putting linear on a new platform, but you're thinking about it in a completely different way.
And how much, I mean, since you guys are both fairly fresh to Asia, how much is of when you came here to kind of start the journey that you guys are doing today, but you've been in the industry, right? How much is surprising to you about Asia? Like, what have you learned that surprised you, and what have you, you know, come and you expected and it's been the way that you expected? Because I think what you were working on in your previous lives has a lot to do with where you're at today, but you're doing it through the kind of new to Asia lens. So I'm curious how much that's influencing how you see and what you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm just, anybody who's in this business just loves to learn, right? So for me, it's just exciting and every place is different. And just, I often tell people I'm working in Southeast Asia, but even Southeast Asia is quite a generalization in and of itself, right? But to me, it's more, so I don't think there were any surprises. It's more what's different, right, about where we are. And when I think of what's different, then I'm thinking of it through a product mindset as well, okay? Because in terms of expertise, in terms of talent, in terms of intellect, in terms of just being able to develop. Like, so I've been in, as you have, in many places, in London, in New York, in San Francisco, and the talent that you can find here is on par with the talent that you can find in those places, right? But it's hard to find talent. Right, it's hard to find talent anywhere, but it's very, very hard to find people here. But otherwise, for me, the differences are really all around the product and what the differentiators are. And I don't know if you want to get into that now or save that for a little bit later.
Well, we keep talking about it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So.
I mean, that's a good point, because I think I always talk about this a lot. Like, just to reiterate that, like if you think of using Netflix. If I open it up here, it's not any different than really opening it up in America for the most part, and maybe some content curation, but features and functions and all pretty much homogenized across the globe. But I think in both your products, that's quite a different view of how you're kind of designing and building for Asia. Would that be fair?
It is, and I think you also, for us, we're Asia and the Middle East. So I think, I've found from previous experience as well as here that, putting something into Arabic script is not just a matter of making it go right to left. You need to remap. You need to look at it. But I think some of the how people use it is becoming the hygiene factor. And really, you're going to be competing on content. Yes, you should be able to download. Yes, it should remember where you were last watching and move it between devices.
Basics.
Yeah, it's all that basic stuff. Whereas it's really, I think, going to be about the content and the partnerships that you have. And some of the technology stack that's going to make that work. But I think we're understanding that technology stack. We're understanding how to make a stream start quickly and at high quality, not get that real ramp up through fuzzy vision into 4K or wherever you ultimately end up. But I think that my learning for me is, and some of this sound silly, is just how big and disparate the market is. But a lot of the commonalities in what people are looking to see, what they're looking to watch. But I think the key thing then is to have the data analytics and the ability to mine that data to look at the markets within the markets. And then that's where I think we'll start probably seeing the differences, is not within the countries, but as we're analysing and probably creating new markets across the region as well.
Segments of people within countries.
Yes.
Yeah, from my perspective, so you mentioned Netflix, and say what's a differentiator that Hook has, or how are we going to compete in these markets? At the very top level, there are two things that drive that for me, right? One is there's someone who's, well, it's been a while, about 10 years ago, someone who's famous in the product management space, Marty Kagan, right? And his point is about finding points of misery or points of friction and solving for those. The second one is more, for me at least, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is Southeast Asia, so it's what are the differentiators there? And when you look at that, the first one, as you said, is content, right? So one of the things we're looking at is, and it's clearly around local content, right? So how do you provide content that Netflix doesn't have? Second one, in the markets that we're in, and Hook is specifically right now focusing on Southeast Asia, right? It's price points. So we have to get the right price points. Third one is now how you pay, right? How do you actually do that? In a lot of the markets that we're in, people, even if they can afford that subscription for a month or more, are willing to pay 10 to 20% more, but they buy it in chunks. So they're payment methods. Distribution channels. So I'm talking about all these things where if I was in London or New York, things that I really wasn't worrying about.
Probably things you didn't even
think about,
bother
right?
to deal with. Yeah.
Distribution channels now. So it's in terms of distribution channels, I wouldn't have thought at a Viacom or a BBC to go out and make partnerships with telco providers or broadband providers or mobile providers and spend time really thinking about how you're going to customize and make that experience a lot better for them, and how that could bootstrap the business, right? And then I think the biggest thing for us is that our center of mass is Southeast Asia. We are developing core content here in Southeast Asia for Southeast Asia, right? And so if you get to the build to buy part of it, it's more, there are a number of things that I think we need to build because they are not being built right now, right?
Local content being one of them.
Yeah.
So when I think of it as a consumer, right, how many people, I'm hoping most everybody in the audience is a consumer of media, or maybe even fanatical about it. I myself consume a fair amount. And so I always try to think of the things that have maybe been magic in the industry that you kind of, and one of them is just obviously being able to watch on your phone anytime, but we all know that that's normal now. I think for me, the most probably magical experience in changing my OTT consumption habits as of late's probably been when Netflix added download, because previous to that, the only time I could watch Netflix is, well, I could have just sucked up all my expensive M1 gigabytes, or I could download stuff, right? And normally that was associated with piracy, and that's, in most services, that's largely changed, and they're offering it. And if you guys were to proffer your own bets on what you think is going to be a magical change in the future for the consumer journey, what would that be, right?
Other than blockchain.
Yeah, other than blockchain.
Yeah, I don't know. So I don't.
And Face ID.
Yeah, and Face ID and Face ID. So I think, you know, there are several levels here where I think a lot of it at this, and there are cycles, right? The cycle right now, and we were talking about this a bit earlier. The ultimate experience is people just want to watch the content they want to watch when they want to watch it. They don't want the technology in the way. They don't want the search in the way. They don't want you to make up something else for them. They just want to see the right thing at the right time, right? So I think a lot of the things that I wouldn't consider them magical, but it's more about how easy is it for you to access that device, to log in, to throw your content to different devices, whether it's on your phone, on your set-top box, on something else. How easy is it to share that content with other people? How easy is it to share it with your family? If you're in Indonesia, how easy is it to buy it if you don't have money in your wallet at that time, in your digital wallet at that time, or you don't have that, right? So at the beginning, it's more about that, the access part of it. I think there are plenty of things that you can get into in terms of recommendations and discovery and, in terms of how you can use technology to make that recommendation better, right? But I think that's all incremental. To me, it's all incremental. So unfortunately, I don't have any.
Yeah, and I think a lot of tech struggles from incremental. I'm just always, sometimes the leaps are when there's something kind of simple and magical, right? So I'm just curious if you think about your own consumption habits.
Easing, we'd say, I know what it is, we're not going to tell you because it's magical.
Yeah. It's a Fox feature that you're going to launch in 3 months.
Absolutely. Secret Fox feature. Yeah. I absolutely agree. I think it's ease and that portability which comes through the download.
Yeah.
That's the big breakthrough. What's going to enable that and continue to enable that then is the rights and the ability to acquire those rights and to protect those rights and making the rights owners comfortable with that. But I don't sense any particular big leap forward these days. It's ultimately going to make us think, wow, I'm sure there is something.
Sure.
Maybe, for some immersive content, the ability to live stream VR rather than have to put it through post-production could be something that would work for some and for some events in it.
Yep.
So, yeah, but I think right now, I mean, the big leap would be you're in Bandung or Jakarta. You want to see something right away. You've got the equivalent of 25 cents in your wallet, and you start that experience in less than a second. That's a big leap forward here.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of dealing with payments is one thing, right? But I don't know if that's everybody's problem because, but I think, but I think the world of media is changing. So one of the things that talk about a little bit is if you look at the people talk about in America, like the Four Horsemen, right? And, for those of you who may not know, like Professor Scott Galloway or some of these things, largely outside of China, of course, this has changed recently. I think yesterday, Tencent's now worth more than Facebook, which is pretty amazing, right? So, but prior to that, it's actually been, everybody talks about Apple, everybody talks about Netflix, Amazon, and Google, and then maybe, you could throw in some other players into this thing, like Apple. And all these companies, are doing something with media where like 5 or 6 years ago, they did nothing, right? So Apple's going to talk about spending $4 or $5 billion in content, and yet they're not a content company, almost as much as Netflix, right? And Amazon obviously got Prime Video, hasn't been fully launched out here. I'm curious, when you look at this landscape of the huge guys, does it factor into how you think about Asia at all, or do you still see that these other things are, and what you guys are doing with Fox and kind of the affiliate model, it's already been kind of done in the States, but hadn't been done here well. How much does the influence of the big players affect how you guys think as CTOs in running your business today?
It heavily, because it's going to end up here, even if Amazon haven't launched Prime Video here.
Yeah, it's coming.
They will.
Yeah.
Likewise with Apple. And they're going to commission these shows and this technology to be globally deployed. They're not just going to settle on North America and Europe or whatever it is. So I think, yeah, it is ultimately going to come here. And I think that's also back to the point you were making about the CTO, the CIO. It's great as CTOs to have lots of capital and not always to worry about being a revenue center within a commercial business. Yeah, we want to build, a really good, strong, as I call them, new train set to deliver. But I think it's also having to do that efficiently and proving to your organization that your spend is real value and you're seeing a real return on it, and finding what those pain points are, maybe not just for the consumer, but for the business as well, and fixing them.
Yeah, I mean, there are several levels to answer your question. I mean, the first one is clearly we don't know how this one's going to end up. So part of the strategy is actually to have multiple strategies, right? And then if you even look at, and to be able to experiment, but if you look at Hook's business right now, we actually have a couple of business models going on. And so in India, we have a slightly different approach than we do in all the other countries. And it's basically because you have those pressures in spades in India in terms of all the big guys getting in there, whether it's, and then companies like Reliance Jio and other companies just investing large sums of money, giving away a lot of things, right? Giving away the network, where our strategy there is to pick a niche and partner with those big players. Now, clearly, we're not partnering with Amazon right now, right? But we're partnering with other players there. Well, in a country like Indonesia, for the near term, Netflix is not an issue for us.
Sure.
Right? We are.
You have some runway there.
Yeah, we have some runway there, and so we need to build the brand. We are now clearly at some point in time, the numbers get pretty big in terms of content there, right? But for the near future, we've got the runway there. And then, there's a fifth horseman. You talked about Tencent, but it's like Alibaba's in town,
sure,
right? Yeah. And this is their backyard, right? So there's quite a bit going on.
I'm rooting for Tencent. Just
there you go. There you go. Yeah. So I don't think it's a done deal, and there are still niches and markets to be won, and the time frames here, for us to get to a point where they're a threat in a place like Indonesia are probably at least 4, 5, 6 years down the road, right? So those things that I talked about.
And I think one of the big battlefields of sorts is Southeast Asia, right? For all these guys,
and I think for us, because we have the affiliate model from our linear channels, so working closely with pay TV providers, with the telcos who are offering pay TV services, that gives us, we're hoping it gives us a really strong presence and feel for what works in an individual market. And I think what also, the influence of, when the Netflixes or whoever comes is, we've built up a really strong library. I think Fox Plus has about 10,000 hours of content in it ready to search. So that gives us some other challenges. How do you find it? How do you curate it? But there's a lot of depth and width
to
there.
It. Yep, agree. All right, so in the interest of keeping this interesting, I'm going to open up the floor so there's actually time for some questions. Make sure there's not a Hook employee or a Fox employee asking the questions. That's my first rule. I think there's people out there with the mics, hopefully. Yeah. Anybody have any questions while we still have enough time to give good answers? Nobody? All right. I just want to make sure the floor was open if you had a question. There is one? Oh, go ahead.
So I heard you mention a couple of times that you won't take question on blockchain.
Well, it's just, I think it's...
Why is that?
You can't answer them in 1 minute. That's the problem.
But still, I mean, if, three of you are there, and even the last panel just mentioned blockchain but didn't go there. Where do you think this is heading? And
I think it has zero influence on the media space today because there's much bigger problems that... And I think a lot of times people are running around like blockchains chasing a solution that you could just use a database for. So I don't personally, my view, because I'm in the investment space and look at a lot of stuff, I don't think it has an effect on how you deal with a Hook or a Fox today. That's my take. The content business in general, I think there's always issues around managing digital rights and managing theft. And those things could be very interesting to maybe solve with blockchain, but I always like to tell people that's all fine and dandy, but just go to Pantip Plaza in Bangkok and buy the TV that has the HDMI out cable, not the HDMI in cable, and copy whatever you want. And it won't matter whether it was fingerprinted. So I don't see how blockchain affects these guys today, but let's see what they have to say.
I agree. We've got bigger opportunities and bigger challenges. And it's not just about getting new products out there, it's about looking at how we create our products, how we engage with the audience. You know, as I said, we've got, it's interesting, I was at a session first thing this morning, it's talking about, you know, people live streaming. And then the opposite of that is, I'm too busy experiencing life to stream it, which is a great, great thought, quite a welcoming thought, actually. Yeah. Yeah, there's great opportunities. We have the Nat Geo, you know, Nat Geo is part of who Fox is in this region, and I think the opportunities we have there, not just within the traditional media space, but going out into licensing and you know, in the expeditions and returning is important, but also, you know, we cover sport. So how can we provide more localized sport without the cost of sending a $5 million OB truck and 7 cameras to cover a local basketball or a baseball game? Yeah. I think those are the issues which and I think there's opportunities to take processes apart, which are some of the things blockchain's helping, but yeah, just that mindset of how do you completely re-engineer something to make a better experience, a more localized experience.
Yeah, so I think it was just a few CTOs just making a joke that just wasn't a good joke, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah, we'll try to be funny.
It's about buzzwords, right? Yeah. So I'd agree, you know, so blockchain.
We're not good stand-up comedians, we will admit it.
It's not on the list. But then if you were going to start to go through buzzwords, then you start to get into machine learning or AI, right? And then fold that over some of the things that you've talked about in terms of how do you view Google or Amazon. Yeah. Those are the types of technologies that are actually,
I mean, there's simple things, like give you an example. I'm always just, and you guys are dealing with this, and all of us OTT have just the whole hell that is subtitles, because I'll call it that. It's just the hell that is subtitles. But like my wife's a native Thai speaker, and we like to watch stuff, and there's this fantastic service, I won't mention the name, in Thailand that you get anything you want, and the reason we pay for it, even though, is every single thing comes with a Thai subtitle, everything, right? Which I can't get out of commercial services that I'd want to pay for that I wish would have it, and we all know they have it somewhere, but I'm not the viewer in Thailand, therefore I don't get the Thai subtitle. But honestly, I would pay an extra $5 a month if someone said, and you'll have the option of having Thai on everything you watch, right? These are those magical things that we're all, and it's more of a rights issue and some technology issue than probably your ability to want to do it.
And even where I think it's not a rights issue, it's about an understanding of the market. There's a big Thai population living in Singapore. Why aren't we making the Thai subtitle? Yeah, we probably do have them. And I think...
But I know if I turn on Fox here, there's not a Thai switch for Walking Dead. But if I get it from a pirated service in Thailand, the Thai's there.
Never do.
I'd never do that. I just check them every once in a while to see their quality of streaming.
Yeah, absolutely.
See what CDN they're using.
And I think machine learning is interesting. And I can really see how it's going to help us with the data and looking at how and all of that stuff. Where I struggle, and to be honest, where they struggle is I can meet with the Googles and the Watsons and all of these guys. And I say, oh yeah, you know, I'll use an example. In India, if there is smoking on the screen, you have to put up the caption that says smoking kills. It's the law. Big trouble if you don't. So, you know, these guys say, we can spot if there's smoke on the screen, we can trigger.
Put it up automatically.
And I said, excellent. So I don't have to have anyone watch that, and you will indemnify me against action by the Indian regulator. Oh, no, no, no. Well, hang on. It's either then I still have to have someone to watch it. So don't tell me something, sell me something that's actually really not going to move my business.
But in theory, it'll get there, and those will be these kind of technical leaps. But then they need to
step up, I think, though, and say, yeah, we put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah. Any other questions? These have been good. We got a couple here. People with the mic. There we go.
The OTT platform market right now seems to be highly fragmented, and it'll probably become more so with the networks and the studios coming up with their own platforms. and it's getting very difficult to manage subscriptions. Do you feel that there could be a consolidation of platforms? Maybe Tencent takes over everyone, something like that in the future?
Can I just ask, when you say difficult to manage subscriptions,
Well, I think
as
it
a
means
consumer,
you're paying
as a
HBO
consumer,
something, you're paying,
It's remembering the passwords, actually. That's my problem with all these things, is not who I'm paying.
One password for your set-top box doesn't work good. Yeah.
I think it could happen, or maybe the next big thing for the consumer is certainly we have it in the UK in banking, is you can bank with HSBC, but actually set up your HSBC that when you log in, you then log into Barclays and Santander. So maybe the thing is centralized management account that takes all of those things away.
Apple's kind of doing that with the Apple TV now in the States. It just hasn't, like, where it'll roll you into these if you're actually subscribed to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in Disney, what's the Disney locker that's going around? What's that called? Clearly, we're not part of it right now, the Disney thing.
To dig into your question, because I think it's just no different than why someone says you can download or not. It's not a technical thing. So what you're talking about has nothing to do with tech. Let's be honest. Like, people actually forgot that cable was pretty magical because of the aggregation and bundling techniques. And what's happening in OTT is it's cable's infancy. It's the unaggregated cable play. Are you saying will it eventually get aggregated? I think so, but I actually have a feeling we're going to be in a valley for a while of unaggregation because all of these people want to line up against each other, not with each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think right now. So if you look in the States, you have HBO with BAMTech. So the first thing is right now is it's a number of content players are just making bets on technology companies for their platforms. So that's now going towards separate platforms, right? And so you have BAMTech, you have Comcast Technology, which used to be the platform, and someone else that I can't think of right now. But so there's a tendency to go that way. I actually think in Southeast Asia, there's a demand for some of that aggregation to start happening now, and I think it's based upon the scale here, where if you're a Disney or you're a Comcast, you can afford to do that, or an AT&T. How could I forget? AT&T and QuickPlay, right?
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them. So, but I think in this particular region, you don't have that scale, right? You have it in China, clearly, but in Southeast Asia, so I think there is an appetite for that. Right.
But you'll always see some problems. Like if you have the latest Apple TV and the latest software, they have their own TV app, and they search across everything but Netflix. Because obviously Netflix doesn't want to pay ball. So I always think you'll have people that don't want to play ball in this aggregation play, right? And I think, everybody's long talked about both Apple and Google have tried to come up, the tech guys, and Google's got the Google TV thing that's largely trying to do what you're saying. Apple supposedly has given up because they could never get the price points they wanted for what you call the skinny TV bundle. Yeah. It just turned out they could never make it skinny. That's the problem, right?
And I think it's, as you say, the reason Apple won't scan across to Netflix, nothing to do with technology.
No, it's Netflix won't make it available to them.
That's commercial, that's political, that's, I don't know, egotistical, whatever
it's almost maybe the right thing to do. I kind of look at this as Google and what's happened to newspapers. If a lot of them wouldn't allow themselves to be scanned, you might have kept doing your paywall. But as soon as you don't need your paywall, it falls down. So I look at this as the same analogy, right? I know why Netflix is doing it. That they want to remain in control, right?
And I think as well, in the TV and film industry, people are looking at papers, they're looking at music, and trying to learn from that, whether we're learning in the right way. But we've seen, the issues of the music industries.
Yeah, and actually coming back to blockchain, you're going to be amazed that I'm doing this. There is some theory to managing payments, but the problem you have with the veracity of the rise in price in crypto, people actually don't want to use their crypto to pay for things because by holding on to them, they're making more money than actually using them as a payment method. So it remains to be seen if crypto becomes a better version of micropayments when what's happening is everybody's grabbing them and holding them because the value is rising versus you actually using them to pay for things. So that used to be my thesis, that this would be a neat payment kind of and now everybody wants to hold on to them. No one wants to, because they're all like, oh my God, I bought a pizza with my blockchain when it was $3,000 and now I could have bought the pizza chain, right? Like, So I think that's another problem you have that almost looked like a solution that's now falling apart, right? All right, more questions. I think we have time for one more. I saw another hand here. Yep. Can we get a mic over here? This will have to be the last one.
Thanks so much. And I just want to know, you guys, has been very familiar with the Asian market, and also look like all you guys come from West Side also. And like American film market becomes so important, although they use American name, but it's a global market. And I hope one day Asia TV market become global. Asia becomes so important in the many aspects in the world. And from you guys, all you guys perspective, how we can create more and more Asian-focused content for global audience.
We're doing that already, so that's okay. Particularly with Nat Geo, we're commissioning a lot of content within the region that we schedule locally and in local prime time across the region, but that also finds its way into the Nat Geo catalogue. And I think there are opportunities with our Chinese production, A, to take that to the Chinese-speaking, Mandarin-speaking diaspora around the world, but also then to look at how do you localize that? How do you take that drama, that script, and make it work? Certainly I saw it when I was in the Middle East, that like really long dramas. It's the Spanish TV novella concept, which we were then taking into the Middle East, buying that and exporting it. So it may not be, here's a movie that was shot in Mandarin and we subtitled it, that might be that, but it also might be exporting the IP. And also the production is, great production opportunities here, I think, like other parts of the world have seen.
Yeah, IP can use co-production,
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, I just want to say two things about this, because this is one of the things that I think, one of several things Hook is doing well. Right, so number one is we fund original productions in every one of the countries we're in, right? We co-fund productions. So we are constantly launching originals and funding local content. We also recently launched not a contest per se, but something where we ask different screenwriters to come in with their ideas, and we're funding, I think it's five screenwriters. We're funding their pilots, and then we'll continue with that. So we are heavily investing in local content. The second thing is, I sit here and tell you about how we're homegrown with an American accent. I know that doesn't sound right. But in terms of the team we have, other than myself and one or two people, we are entirely a homegrown team. We have a development center in Indonesia, in Bandung. We have a lot of people in Jakarta. We have a development center here. We have developers in Thailand and India, and we are continuing to grow those. Right, we're probably going to grow by 30 or 40%. It's all about local talent. The guy who runs engineering for me, Dwi, who you know, constantly jokes about being the CTO. He introduces himself as a CTO. He will probably be the
Asian
CTO. No, but it's just, and so I'm happy that I've been invited here to help with that. But I think it is all about growing what you just said, right?
Cool.
That's great. That's great.
We got to wrap up. So thank you very much, guys. This was fun. Thanks to the audience for the questions, and have a great afternoon. Yep.